Morning, guys. Dr. Ken Nordberg, fireside hunting seminar. I got something for you to think about. In 20 days, bucks will shed velvet. In 20 days, bear hunting season starts. That's not 3 weeks away, you know. It's time to start getting serious about thinking about bear and deer hunting this year. And if you want your seasons this year, if you're hunting bear on your own, do-it-yourself kind, which you can do very well if you know what to do, or bow hunting this year, trying to be out there in mid-September, as early as you can. I know there is a lot you don't know yet that you need to know to be regularly successful to hunt older bucks. And bow hunters, gun hunters, most gun hunters, there's hunters that say, no, I just soon shoot a doe or a nice fat forky. Well, that's okay. But if you're serious about wanting to hunt bucks that are wasted, you know, almost all of them die of natural causes in the woods. Not very many are taken by hunters. They're just too darn smart for hunters, and I'll be talking more about that today. So, anyway, not much time left now to start getting ready and or thinking about it. So if you haven't got your books yet, like, you know, my bear hunting book, and the original, this is the 5th edition, the original first edition changed the way bears are hunted all over North America. Honestly. And if you had the book in your hand, start reading it, you'd soon learn why. And there's probably about 20 reasons why most bear hunters don't ever get a really large bear, a bear that weighs 300 pounds or more. And gee, there's 800 pounders out there, really large bears, but most hunters never see them while they're hunting in a lifetime. And maybe you get a glimpse of one way out there somewhere, or from while you're in the vehicle moving along, but not while you're hunting. It's very difficult to hunt bears. But if you know what you're doing, you can be really close to them and maybe even take, you know, really decent ones, that bears that weigh 300 pounds or more every time you go bear hunting on your own. So, good book to have. So keep that in mind. And the other one is this one, this monster. This is the deer hunting book. And this one too, this book is changing the way whitetails are being hunted all across North America today. It's going to take a little while, but within the coming decade, everybody's going to be talking about terms like ground level stand hunting. You say, oh, you can never do that, you got to be up in the tree. Or opportunistic stand hunting, or progressive standing. All kinds of terms you're going to find in this book. Everybody's doing that because they're really successful ways to take deer, and especially older bucks. So if you don't know about things like that, it's time you learn, because eventually you're going to do it. You're going to want to do it because one of your buddies is going to get the book and he's going to start using these techniques, and he's going to start taking big bucks, and you're going to say, geez, what are you doing to get all these bucks, big bucks every year? Well, he may or may not tell you, but yeah, in either case, it's going to be this book that makes the difference. So keep that in mind. That's coming up. You don't want another season like you had last year. You want a successful one this year, one where you take a decent buck, kind that they're all over the place. People don't think there are many in existence anymore, and they think something's got to be done to increase their numbers. But there's more really big bucks, trophy class bucks, than ever, because average hunters just hardly ever see them, much less take them. You know, most hunters using traditional hunting methods just can't take bucks like that, except by extreme luck, or hunting in an enclosed area, or with a guide who knows what he's doing. But anyway, that's a book you're going to want. Eventually, one way or another, you're going to want to get this book. And so keep that in mind. Okay, well, let's get busy with what I want to talk about today. Got a lot of unusual things to talk about today, something different. Yeah, I'm going to talk about a big buck I took back in 1998. I first saw this buck in 1996, and I was so impressed with its antlers that I made up my mind that I'm going to hunt this buck next year. I saw him on the last afternoon of the hunting season that year, and I hadn't taken one yet. And there was a 2.5-year-old buck living in that area. There's a string of beaver ponds in that area, and that string of beaver ponds is about, a little more than a quarter-mile long. And the only way a deer could get from one side to the other is go all the way to the south end, where we usually had our camp, or all the way to the north end, where it could cross the little creek flowing off out of the last one of those beaver ponds, quite a distance there. And it seemed like 2 or 3, maybe 4 of us had seen that deer standing there looking at us and passed him up. No, I don't want him. Yeah, you take him. No, I don't want him. We hear all that. And then come the end of the season, and I had done that as well. I said, I watched that buck for a good 20 minutes one day. Could easily have taken him. Well, now we're saying, well, at the end of the season, we only have 3 bucks so far, and we like our venison. So I'm going to try and get that one. And I found him in an area that we often saw this buck, on one side of the ponds. But I saw him on the opposite side when I saw him. But I found him over there, and I got a couple glimpses of him. He wasn't running, he was sneaking around in this dense timber, and I kind of tiptoed in there trying to get close to him. Then he took off running around the end of that south end of the string of ponds, got over on the other side. And so I went back over to the other side near one of our camps, and I went sneaking through the dense evergreens down to close to the ponds, and there he was, and he ran back the direction he came from the first time. And so I went over there again, but this time he kept going. He was walking fast, not trotting or bounding, but walking fast. And I thought, I know what he's doing now. He's going to go to the other end of the ponds to cross over to that one side. So I was in a hurry. I thought, I'm going to hurry down this side of the ponds, get close to that creek crossing there at the north end, and I'll bet I'll ambush him there. He's going to be, that's where he's heading. He wants to come around over on this side. So that's what I was doing. I was walking real fast. I was about 4 blocks from where I last seen that buck going around, and I was heading north, and not paying attention. I just wanted to get to that creek crossing area as fast as I could. And all of a sudden, this big buck, it was right on the left of me. It was only about 20 yards away on the trail. I was walking on this deer trail, and he come bounding out of there. And he went down through a little grassy opening and disappeared into really dense popples, or quaking aspens, better known by most people, and disappeared. And I was really kicking myself, holy cow. You know, I should have been paying attention. I probably would have had an easy standing shot at that deer if I hadn't been moving the way I was. But then on the other hand, if I wasn't moving the way I was, I probably wouldn't have gotten that close. But he thought I was just going to walk right on by him. But I stopped there because usually we saw a lot of grouse in the area, and I thought I saw a grouse moving up ahead, and I didn't want to flush it while I was going north. So I stopped, and when I stopped, that's when it happened. Just crash, 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 out he went. Well, one of the things I noticed about him, his antler was kind of weird in a way. They didn't, the main beams, when they came out of his forehead, they didn't curl around and then toward the front, you know, kind of like on a horizontal plane. They went up, you know, and his tines, he had when I saw him at that point, at least 4 of his tines were at least a foot long, and they were sticking up. Of course, that's like talking about fish that got away, or bears you see in the woods. They're always you always describe them as bigger than they really are, but it really had a nice wreck. But it was kind of weird because it would all kind of point upward and inward. You know, going away, I could see these tines kind of pointed inward. Well, I knew then, of course, I'd have no chance to take that buck this year, that year, because whenever you make a buck raise his tail and bound away with all possible speed, those big ones like that, they're gone for the season. You're just not going to see them anymore that season. But so I was determined, boy, next year I'm going to hunt that buck if he gets through the winter, okay, which he did. Well, anyway, after the buck disappeared, and I concluded there's no chance to take that one. I took off again, heading to the creek crossing, and I got down there and sat down on my stool in some dense evergreens where this trail goes down a little hill, and over to the other side of a nice deer trail, well used by deer crossing either way there. And so I waited there a little bit, and pretty soon I heard something. Pretty soon, here comes that 2.5-year-old who's a 6-pointer. And I waited till he got to my side, so I went after dragging him across that stream and dropped him in his tracks right there about 20 yards away. That's all it was, so it was rather easy. And that way we filled our 4-buck limit, our self-imposed limit for the year. We don't take more than that per year because we don't want to overhunt our older bucks. And we're capable of that, you know. If we said, well, we'll take 6 every year, pretty soon there wouldn't be any more really big bucks in the area. So we always made and that gave us all the events that we cared to have each year. So anyway, I used to put on a hunting school up in that area at the Lawrence Environmental Center north of Virginia, Minnesota, every year in the spring, usually right at the end of April and the first days of May, right about that time. Good time to be in the woods then. It was before the mosquitoes got to be bad, and the black flies, which are notorious in northern Minnesota, and the ticks before they get to be really abundant as well. So a good time for the school. And my school was 4 days long, and 2 days of it was spent in the woods, showing everybody exactly what I wanted them to see and learn in the woods, in my own personal hunting area. We'd drive up there and go through that. And it would take us 2 days to get through all the spots that I wanted to show to my people in the class. And that was fun. I enjoyed it. Well, my wife always accompanied me in preparing for the school. I usually went up there every year a week early to scout, get ready for the school, and also to prepare trails and new stand sites, places that I might be using during the coming year in the fall. And so most of the trails in this one area is this one dominant buck breeding area. Well, let's turn to the map here. Let me explain a few things. This is a dominant buck breeding buck's home range. It's about, the total area is about a square mile, probably about maybe close to 600 acres, something like that. 700, well, probably closer to 700. Some of them are 1,000, but roughly a square mile size total area. And they aren't squares in the woods. But anyway, I scouted this whole area. You know, when the first time I saw that buck was right about, where is it? Right about here. Oh no, it was right about here. So this where, and he ran off toward the north, going this way. So I went up there to look around, and one place I had in mind to really look over carefully was a high little knob in the woods there, overlooking this rushing stream down below. And I kept thinking, you know, there's only one trail going through that knob. It's on this side above the steep slope down to this rushing stream, and just thundering through this little canyon there, a rocky. Well, so I went up there and I searched all through that area, and I discovered it was bedding a lot on the south side of those evergreens, this pine knob evergreens. And these were big white pines. There was big ones and little ones, and gee, at 6 foot, at 6 foot height, it was really thick, and you couldn't see very far through them in any one direction. And then great big towering pines above that. Good place for a deer to bed, because it provided plenty of, not only plenty of good cover, you could lay down in those younger evergreens and not be seen very easily by anything passing through there. And the one big trail through there. There was no other trails there, just this one going around there. But he didn't bed close to that trail, because I suppose it was just too noisy there. That stream crashing through those rocks probably made a lot of noise, and whitetails have to depend on their ears to protect them from approaching danger when they're bedded. That ears will give them warning in 360-degree directions, so they wanted to be able to hear. So I suppose he laid on this side with all that greenery between him and that stream. It was probably quiet on that side, so he could lay over here. And not only that, he could see a long way. He could see quite a ways over to this area. It's a high spot there. It's a pretty wide area, and it'd be hard for a pack of wolves or a human to walk through there without being seen by this buck when he's laying there in the middle of the day, for example. So it's really kind of a neat spot for a big buck to bed. Well, when I found that out, I tried to figure out how to hunt this thing. And I couldn't, when I went in anywhere around this area, and on this side, there was no way, and this side dips down, a real deep area down close to the water here. No place I could keep an eye on anywhere on the buck laying in this area. And I decided, well, the second best thing to do is sit up here on this trail, or close to it, on that side, at ground level with my stool. And if this buck comes out and walks on this trail, or comes over this way to walk down this way, I'd see him and have a good chance there. So one of the things I decided to do that year is really clean up this trail here. Gene and I created this trail here. I did a lot of that cleaning on my hands and knees, got pictures of that. But anyway, we cleaned that up, and I put fluorescent tacks on tree trunks along the way so I could find my way easily in the dark. Go straight to my stand site in the dark in the morning early, and you know now why I like to do that. But anyway, so I had this all set up so I could go to a ground level stand site just on the other side of that trail there and wait there. And I kind of liked it because this buck had one of his unique antler rubs on that trail. Since then, there have been other dominant bucks that have used that spot, and they even put ground scrapes on that trail there. But he didn't make it. This buck didn't do that. So, but this buck had some unusual antler rubs. I never seen anything like it. He didn't make them on really big trees. They were the biggest I ever saw in that area. The buck had big tracks, almost 4 inches long, not quite, for the hoof only. What it would do is, it looked to me like he would straddle a tree about 2.5 inches in diameter, and he would work on it. He'd take the bark off that tree all the way from about 2 feet above the ground, all the way to the tip, and there it would be bent over, and the top part was, all the bark had been rubbed off. That's the craziest antler rub I ever saw. And during that year and the following year and the year after that, I found those same antler rubs in this area, this region up here. And so I knew he was there. I'd find his trap, but I knew he had made it through the winter during the following year. So Anyway, so I had this set up, and I said, well, I have to go with, that's all I had time for, go with that one spot, so I had ground level stand site up there. So, anyway, come opening morning that year, the wind was from the south. That's pretty common. We start with a south wind up there where we hunt. And so I decided that would be perfect for this spot. And I would go up there on this trail, get way up there, kind of, staying well away from where that buck was dead. Remember now, this is a pretty big area here. And it got over to my stand over there, got around him to the back side, and the wind blowing from this direction. And so by staying over to one side, my scent kept going that way, or at least I thought that was the way things were working. But I was pretty excited. I thought, oh, I got a good chance to get that big buck this year. So I got up there and sat down, and I sat there, and just in case, I took a lunch with me. I didn't want to be going back and forth during the day. So I took a lunch with me, and I had a light lunch there where I sat. And I sat there from dark to dark that day and didn't see a thing, nothing. I thought, well, maybe somewhere with a doe in heat, and so maybe that'd probably be a good reason. So until I learned anything more about this buck, I thought, well, I'm going to try it again the next morning. And again, I had a south wind. In fact, I think it was a little bit southwest, so it was blowing this way. And I got up to where my stand site was, flashlight, and always pointed at the ground, and I got to where it was, and here was these big tracks, buck tracks, all around that tree where I'd sat, and a new antler up. It wasn't a real big one, but it had scraped a bunch of bark off, right where my back was leaning against a tree. And I looked at that, and how do you hunt a buck like that? That buck told me. He knew I was there. Well, I probably could smell my scents, on that tree bark or whatever. But he was telling me I wasn't fooling him a bit. And I could sit here for a week and never see that buck. Son of a gun is really smart. So I thought, oh my, I'm going to quit here. I'm going to go hunt another buck. And until I try to figure things out, and before long I did get another buck. So I thought, well, at the end of the season, well, I'm going to give him a try. I hope he wins, he lives another year. Normally, bucks in the wild, the older ones, don't live more than, well, they don't survive their 7th winter where we hunt. And that's pretty true everywhere. You don't see many bucks that are 7.5 years of age in the fall. I've hunted whitetails for, well, this will be 75 years now. And that particular buck, when I'm telling you this too soon, but I did get him, finally. And he was, and I was able to figure out he was actually 7.5 years of age. And the way I could tell, his antlers, for one thing, weren't quite as big as previously. They were still the same upright antlers, sticking up and with tips kind of pointed inward. That hasn't changed, but they weren't as long. Now, most wild bucks are in their prime between ages 4.5 and 6.5. 5.5 is absolutely tops. That's when they're going to have the best antlers in their life, during age 5.5. 6.5, they start going downhill a little bit. Now, I've seen collections of antlers taken from the same buck, pen-raised bucks. And I one collection I saw, it was 14 years before it died. Now, older wild bucks don't live that long, so you don't see that happen. And the ones that are pen-raised, they are getting corn and all kinds of other good food, their antlers just kept getting larger during those 14 years. But in the wilds, they don't. After 5.5, they start going downhill a little bit. So, anyway, when I saw this, I said, well, this buck, it was either 6.5 or 7.5 when I got him. But I opened his mouth to look at his teeth. I was curious about that because when they get to, you know, they wear the teeth on chewing grasses and woody shrubs, you know, browse in the winter. They wear down their teeth. And I had never seen as much wear on a buck's teeth in my life. All of its molars were flat. They were really flat. They were black around the edges, and you could wiggle those teeth. Periodontitis, you know, infection down into the root surfaces below the surface of the gums. And so this guy was really old, and you know, what happens to a lot of wild animals like that, hoofed animals, when their teeth get worn to that point, it's hard for them to chew their food, and they usually go downhill really fast when that happens, and they're going to die. And so this deer was, he wouldn't have lived much longer in the wilds. This was in November when I got him, but he was truly a 7.5-year-old buck, as old as they get in the wilds, for wild bucks. So I thought that was really interesting. And his antlers were showing smaller size too. It was the same buck, same configuration, but they were smaller. Good bulk on them, but still smaller. So anyway, it was kind of interesting. But now, anyway, I told you about the 2 years. Now, I knew this buck for 2 years, and he knew me. Now, this is interesting because rarely will you take a really big buck after you've hunted it 1 year. By that time, the end of the first hunting season, and you put in appreciable time to take a certain bit, they know a lot more about you than you know about the buck. And they get to be progressively even more difficult. And next year you might show them something different that you're doing. And they can react in a way that makes you think, how in the world can you ever hunt a buck like this? I have hunted others that did similar things. I had one, I used a clump of spruce trees to hunt for a really big buck. I named him the red antler buck. The second year that I hunted him, and I was in this clump. And the second time I went back to that clump, I didn't see him the first day. Not so unusual when you're hunting really big bucks, and that's why I move stand sites now every day. But anyway, he got up, when I got there the second day, there was a little pine tree, you know, about 6 feet tall, and they're not heavy with branches here and there. There's boughs coming off and up to the top. And that little pine tree had been mangled. That buck had rubbed bark off. It knocked branches, the boughs off, and rubbed bark off. There was hardly any bark on it at all on this 6 foot tall tail. It was a little shorter because he broke off the top as well. But it was, yeah, you could see it in the dark. You're getting closer. What in the world is that white thing over there? Get up closer. It's a tree. Look at the rub on that tree. And then, oh, look at here, 4-inch tracks all around the thing and boughs laying around. This buck had mangled that just 20 yards from where I'd been sitting the day before. Same story. He said, how do you hunt a buck? Like, he was making fun of me, that buck was. You know, he told, boy, you aren't fooling me, you know. And I've had other bucks do that, similar things, different ways. You know, well, I won't get into that. A lot of stories about things like that, but the more you hunt a big buck, the more difficult it becomes to take that buck. Unless you hunt a certain way, like us Nordbergs. We're more likely to take bucks like that because we change stand sites every half day, and that buck doesn't know where we are the next half day, you know. So they're not safe from us every day. And we're always close to them because we always hunt within easy shooting distance of their fresh tracks and or droppings. But that's another story, and you've heard that story before. But so anyway, year 3 came along. Well, I did a lot of scouting that year, and also during the week before my hunting school that year. And my wife and I cruising around the woods there, and we got over into this area. Now, you note this map here before we go to there. There was these pink lined areas are doe home ranges. And and they range in size from 90 to over 200, but yet they average about 125 acres in size. And quite commonly where I hunt, there's 5 doe home ranges within a square mile. And that's typical distribution of deer. And yearlings live within the ranges of their mothers. So there's yearlings in there and fawns of their mothers as well in each one of these ranges. And they all jealously guard their ranges from other does. This doe that lives here, he didn't want you in my range. And if they dare come in there, she's going to attack them and kick them. And they can be really vicious about such a thing. So they keep to their own little ranges. And I suppose that's nature's way of ensuring that a mother doe has enough food and cover and whatever else is needed there for her young to live in that range up through yearling years of age, and or not so much sense of other deer, other does with young in their ranges, which might be attractive to wolves. So they keep their sense to a minimum, and they make sure they always have enough food in that area, cover that they need, stormy weather, things like that. So they don't share unless there's a big feeding area in between. They'll share that. So, well, there's a feeding area like that in that little rectangle there, up here, in this range. And a close-up of it, it looks like this. Now, what I learned that year when I was scouting before my hunting school, we camped here. What we decided to do, this area going straight through here looked pretty awful. We had gotten into this area and scouted around here, and I found this big browse area over here, full of red osiers, or red bark dogwoods, all over. And when I was there in the spring, I found that there'd been a lot of browsing done by deer in that area. There's all kinds of these red bark dogwoods with shaggy brown or black tips on them. The deer had chewed them off during the previous year, during the previous November and December, before they migrated to a wintering area. But anyway, we found this, and a little stream running on it. Here's a big spruce bog with lots of water in it, and the water flowed down this little stream here, going toward another stream further west of there. So anyway, this whole area is like a valley here, real steep on that side and gradual on this side, full of this red bark dogwood all over the place in there. And there was hardly a stem that hadn't been chewed off. So it had to be more than one deer feeding in there. It's one of those places where maybe deer up north of there often fed there, and deer east of there and west of there. Well, anyway, we got up in there, and right about there was a horseshoe-shaped opening. And we named it Horseshoe Valley. And it was grassy and open in there. The grass was maybe 2-3 feet deep, but in the spring it was just low down, and a lot of it was thin bladed grass, like whitetails love. They don't like the wide bladed grass. Maybe they do elsewhere, maybe in the desert or something, but not in northern Minnesota. They like the thin bladed stuff, like in your lawn. And there was lots of that grass in that Horseshoe Valley. And most of the browse was up in this area, rather large area, big wide open area. Well, not wide open, it was so thick you could have deer walking all over in there and not see them. It was that thick in there with brush and other trees and that sort of thing. But anyway, I went all the way around this thing trying to figure out how I could hunt here. And when we went in there, we went on this high rocky ridge here. And we scouted that area, and I had a trail that we had created, Gene and I created, and a couple of grandsons helping, down into this area. And we call that the Bunions Marble Trail. There's a great big rock there, right about there. It looks like a big round bowling ball. But anyway, we we got in that area, and there was no good place on this steep slope to get a good view of the surrounding area. It was all full of birds. Deer could be walking all over there and never see them there, and just a mess there. And so we kept going around, and finally we got over here in Horseshoe Valley, and there was lots of trails crisscrossing in that meadow there in the grass. And one of them went up onto a little island, well, or maybe it's a big rocky outcropping with some big pines on it, and spruce trees and balsam firs on this little ridge here. So we went over there, and I got on there, and right on this end here, there was some really big black spruce or white spruce trees, big trunks on them. And I sometimes use trees like that as a blind, especially those that have boughs that hang down to the ground. And I've taken deer from blinds like that, sitting with that back against the trunk of a tree, and I'm in a little tent formed by evergreen boughs. I'm inside there, and it makes a nice blind, natural blind. And this was high up, you know, maybe 30 feet. No, not that high, about 20 feet above the level of the ground there in the Horseshoe Valley. But still, up a bit, like being in a tree stand 20 feet high, with good cover there. And evergreens behind me, so I had solid cover behind me. I wasn't skylighted at all sitting up there. This is the place. I can see all this. I can see these trails. I can see a little ways into this browse area. Probably I wouldn't be able to get a deer there until it got close to Horseshoe Valley, but that could happen. Because in more scouting, here's an elder, I call it an elder wetland instead of an elder swamp. Well, this area over here was sure an elder swamp. A lot of puddles of black water there, and you know, a lot of peat in the soil up there. A lot of water there, hard to get through there. But over here, it was damp, but kind of mossy, and there was some browse in there. There was some red osiers here and there, but we went around this thing, and we found a large area over here on a little slope, a grassy area, where a doe and fawn had been bedding quite a bit. They'd bed in different places. That's really a rather large area there, right, bedded. And over here, we discovered on this rocky ridge, a pretty good sized ridge, there was an area there where does and fawns also like to bed up in this area. So these were two different home ranges. There was one here and one here. You see this one and this one. Doe home ranges. So this is a doe family bedded there and another one bedded here. And I thought, that's great, because if I'm sitting here and they are feeding in here and they head back over in this direction and to get onto that ridge, or if they're feeding, this one is feeding up there, they head down that way, and if it's in heat, it could have a buck with it, that big dominant buck that I've been trying to get for the last couple of years. Be a good chance. And so I thought, well, that's where I want to go. So we made a trail, and down here, this is all highland up here, mixed timber, and get over here in a steep bank down into this elder swamp, and kind of wet, and not so wet here as over here, but there's puddles of water here and there. And we get over into this little ridge and walk up in there and go across, and then it drops down again, and lots of puddles of water between this one and this one, so I had to be really careful crossing there. But the nice thing about it was, when I got over here out of the danger of stepping water, it was a good time to get ready to go to my stand. And the reason I say that is because, you know, I had from camp to that spot there was a good 2 miles of really rough walking. And that year, it wasn't really cold. I think the temperatures were in the 30s that year during the day, middle of the day. And one thing I learned many years ago, it's a terrible, you know, that's one of the problems that stand-unders have. If you walk any great distance and you're wearing the kind of clothes you think you got to have on when you're sitting in a tree stand, because after a while, it's going to be cold and you want to stay warm the whole time you're there. And I went through every kind of problem. I remember one year my brother gave me some underwear, down underwear, thick down with a shiny kind of fabric on the outside, and separate pants and top. Oh boy, I'll never get cold with these. I mean, the first time I wore them, and I had to walk a great distance to a stand site like us Nordbergs do, because we're always making big detours to make sure the buck we want to get doesn't smell us coming. But anyway, I perspired like crazy in that down underwear, and I was soaked when I got to my stand site, and I was using a tree stand then, and I climbed up my tree, and pretty soon I was just shivering like crazy, and there was nothing I could do about it. All that perspiration was turning ice inside of that down underwear, and that fabric just had trapped the moisture in there. And by 9 o'clock I had to go back to camp and get warm, get out of that crazy underwear. Well, things changed a lot. Along came polypropylene underwear of various kinds, and it might get damp, but it dries quickly, and it breathes, it allows moisture to get away from your skin, so even if it's a little damp, it doesn't take long for it to feel dry again inside. And then they made various thicknesses, like some that you could wear in warmer temperatures, say around 30 degrees, and then a medium weight one that where it was really good for temperatures in the 20s, maybe down to 15 above zero in that region. You could wear that with one pair of underwear. And others that were even more so. But what I often did when it really got cold, I wore 2 or 3 layers of medium underwear. I was adding different layers, and then I know it kind of depended on temperature. Like this particular day, wasn't going to be really cold, so I didn't put my down pants on. My camel blaze orange camp with insulation in them. Oh, they're nice and warm in really cold weather, and they're windproof and waterproof. But anyway, and I wouldn't wear that on a day like that. And the last few years I haven't worn those bibs a lot because it's just been too warm. And in that case, I usually put on my pair of woolen bibs, like my granddad used to wear all the time in the wintertime. And, the wool is probably maybe only a 1/4 inch deep, thick, but really durable. Man, the pair I've got I've had for 50 years, and I still haven't worn them out. And they're great on, warmer days, and I'll put that on. But if it's really getting colder, we're getting down close to 10 above, you're going to have a lot better. And then I've got these down bibs that I wear with suspenders, and they have zippers on the sides of the legs, and I can open those up, and I'll zip the bottom one so they aren't flopping all over when I'm walking. But leave them open, and then I'll take my coat rather than put it on. I'll stuff it into the bag that's attached to the front side of my folding capsule that I wear on my back. So I got a pack sack on, and that gets stuffed in there. And my gloves or mitts or whatever, they go in there. Everything else I think about me, but that goes there. Then I walk out there, I got, polypropylene underwear, and then a polypropylene blaze orange shirt on over that. And that's it. And then say my woolen bibs on that, my cap, and I'll go. And usually I won't sweat at all when I'm wearing that light clothing, but I know I'm going to freeze to death out there once I get close. So anyway, that's the way I was dressed that particular day, and I get out and get just below, just to the bottom edge of that thing, just out of the water. Slip my coat on real quietly, and I could have used my flashlight all the way because it was behind that, kind of protected by that. Turn it off in just a short few steps, about 20 steps, to my big old spruce tree with the boughs hanging to the ground. And I had cleared a little opening in there that I could look through and look out over the Horseshoe Valley. And it was perfect. And so I sat there, and it was starting to get light, and it was probably about 9 o'clock. Now, in our country, where there's a lot of wolves, our deer calmly head back to their bedding areas. They start about 9 o'clock. In the area we used to hunt, Aiken County, there were wolves there too, but not near as many as where we hunt now. And it would be more like 10 o'clock before they'd start back. But they start back earlier where we hunt now. And so pretty soon, oh, I see some ears moving in, you know, and here's a deer coming out of this feeding area, headed toward me. And there was a fawn with it, it was a doe and fawn. I kept thinking, oh boy, where's the buck, where's the buck? Well, they walked right by me, right in front of me, went right past this place, heading for this feeding, this bedding area. I'm sure that's where they were going. And so they went right by me, right down below me there. I could have thrown a rock on them from where I was sitting. And I waited and waited and waited. Oh, I see something else moving coming my way. And I looked out there, and there's those, you know, dark antlers, kind of a black silhouette of deer against the brightening sky, you know, getting bright in the east. And looking out over that way, over toward in that direction, and it was kind of on the top of a little low ridge coming my way. And oh, it's those goofy antlers. There he is, there's the buck. Finally, after 3 years, here he comes, and he has no idea. He had no reason to believe there was any danger here, you know. So he kept coming, and he got into the open area there, in the grassy area, the Horseshoe Valley. And I kept waiting. I was expecting to keep going in the direction that the doe and fawn came, but he walked out there, and instead he turned and started going in this direction. And he got to the point where I had my scope on him, and I kept looking at him, and I thought he'd come this way. Well, then he stopped. 2 more steps, and he would have been gone. It'd be all elders, thick, wild mess out there. I wouldn't have been able to see him anymore. So he was kind of quartering away, and it was a good 100-yard shot. And so I said, I'm going to go for a long shot, like a bow shot, a quarter away through the lungs, you know, and you're up higher, and you go halfway down, and right behind that last rib and fire, and you get both lungs and the heart when you do it that way. So, pow, went right down. I got him at last. Well, so when I got down there, now, you know, it was kind of strange, you know, when I left the house to go to a deer camp to show, I was go up a few days early, set up camp and cut firewood for our 2 big barrel stoves we used to heat our biggest tents. So I was leaving, and Gene says, why don't you get a non-typical buck this year? Well, that's a big order, because I've never seen one here. You know, by that time we'd hunted 6 years there. I've never seen one up here, or 8 years. And so, but if I see one, I'll get it for you. And so, anyway, I walked up to us, I'll be darned. It's a non-typical. Now, here he is. Now, he was 7.5 years old. You know, you see when he's walking, see how those antlers project upward, and the tips, you know, they're way up here. And look at how close the tips are together. There's only about 3 inches between the tips. And then I started thinking, that's why he doesn't make antler rubs on bigger trees, because he can't get them in here, where the bucks love to be able to scrape bark away with their brow tines and this rough stuff on it toward the base of the antlers. To get that on there, it can really grind away stuff. So he couldn't take bigger trees. That was about the limit of what he could do. And so that's why he was like that. And look at how those things tip upward and inward. I've never seen antlers like that before. And so anyway, and then what was really strange about it, you know, and you know, when they get older, sometimes I see all kinds of strange new configurations to their antlers. The tines aren't as long. They're usually as numerous as they are. You know, actually, if there hadn't been anything else here, you'd say that was a 9-pointer. I bet he was a 10-pointer to begin with, but this one wouldn't qualify with that one. But he'd be a 10-pointer otherwise. But look at here, he's got what he's got. He's got 5 on this side, 5 points. See, 3, 4, 5. This side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then what we got here is these extra points on his antlers. Well, there's one here. That's a weird place for it, you know. And one here, and this got broken off, and one here, small ones, which made him a 13-pointer. And this one wouldn't have made it that big a difference. You couldn't call it unless it's an inch long, but you know, if it's your antlers, you call them. I got a 13-pointer this year. Well, anyway, so he was non-typical with these, and you know, with this configuration, he could run through brush with this without catching, you know, when it's wide open and they're wider spread, they're catching brush all the time when they're going through thick brush in the woods. With this one, these kind of open away, you know, they slide off this way. And I suppose maybe one time he was running, maybe running from wolves, this one probably hit something that's substantial as he was going and broke that one off. So it's a little shorter there. So, but the bases are still fairly heavy, you know. But that's how he looked at age 7½. But that was his last winter. It was certainly would have been his last winter. He wouldn't have survived another year. And it was very unusual for him to survive as long as he did. So that's my 13-pointer. And I've got a couple of 12-pointers, and point-wise, this is my this one had more than any of the others. And I meant to have them mounted, have a head mount made of them, but I never got around to it, and I probably won't now. You know, $450 nowadays to have a mount. But anyway, but it solved the mystery of why this particular buck only made antlers rubbed on trees about 2.5 inches in diameter, and then bent them to the ground. I suppose you said, all these other bucks are going to think, oh, there's just a little buck. He's only a 2.5-year-old, because that's usually the size they rub on it. We don't have to worry about it. But when they see what he did to that tree and bent it and took off bark all the way to the tip, then they say, whoa, look at that. Oh, you don't want to mess with that buck. So, but he was smart. That was a smart buck. But in his lifetime, well, his last 3 years of life, from 4.5 to 7.5, that was unusual. That's when a buck is in its prime for sure, and smart. He's learned more about hunters than you can imagine. Those whitetails are much smarter than we give them credit for, but he was a smart buck. But he taught me a lesson. I never forgot. And, you know, when I thought about it for a while, and it's come true so many times since then, you generally only get one chance at a buck like this. Especially if you only hunt at one stand site every year. And that isn't going to be much of a chance if you're not well concealed and you're not careful about your airborne sense and trail sense. You're careful not to do a lot of destruction in there, cutting trees, making shooting lanes, cutting branches off the tree you're on, all those things. Boy, those all contribute to what a buck recognizes every time nowadays as that's an ambush site, a human ambush site. I'm going to stay away from here from now on. Later in the day, the first time you might find his tracks in the snow, and you see where he stopped, and then where his hoof prints are. He moved around a little bit, you know, and they're like, boy, he spent some time here where I couldn't see him behind me because I wasn't looking that way, and if I had been, I wouldn't have seen him anyway. But he was really learning everything he could about me at that time, and from that time on, that buck expected me, the rest of his life, he expected me to be there during the hunting season in November. And he expected me to hunt the way I did the year before. And when we start crossing up our bucks by moving to new stand sites every half day, that changed the whole thing, whole complex. That made it so hard for even a buck as smart as this one to keep away from me. And that created a lot of extra work for us Nordberg. That means, geez, a new stand site every half day, that's a lot of stand points, especially if you're up there hunting for more than a week. Well, you know, that's a lot of them. But a lot of ours are selected at the last moment. And like we're going back to camp. On opening day, see, I'd gone out to this area over in here, knowing there was a doe bedding area here. And I kind of went along this edge here, and there was good browse along the edge there, and I kind of sat over in this area here. And when I left there, I came down, I had a trail that I had established that came out, that went across this thing over to the other side, and then it went back a little way and came out in the woods and then came back here. And they crossed this trail to get back on this. When I got to this trail to get back here, I found tracks of a big buck. They weren't 4 inches, just a little bit short, and I was mindful. I said, I wonder if that's that same buck, because this is all part of his range, and he was in it. And it was with a doe, with a fawn. And they were heading in that direction, toward that feeding area. And so, you know, so that's what made me decide the next morning that the wind was blowing from the west, so I could go out there, crosswind, and wouldn't smell me coming, and go out here and get to this stand site where I could watch that Horseshoe Valley and this side of this browse area. And I said, oh, that buck is with the doe, and the next morning I fully expected to see that buck with that doe. Well, it wasn't exactly with her, but it came to Horseshoe Valley shortly after the doe and fawn went here. So apparently her period of estrus ended probably during the night or early morning. Just next morning it wasn't in estrus, it wasn't in heat anymore. So that buck, maybe when he turned here, maybe he was saying, I'm going to go check one of these other doe ranges to see if any of them are in estrus. And maybe that's what he was about to do. So no use staying with this one anymore. So, but he was close enough, and so I had my chance to take him there. So look at all this stuff, but keep that in mind. If you want to take a big buck, no matter what you know about him, places he likes, the trails he likes to use, where he beds, where he feeds, and all that kind of thing. No matter, even if you aren't there, chances are it's not going to use the same trails or feed in the same feeding area every day. Chances are, you know, individual does are only in estrus or in heat for 24 to 26 hours during that first breeding phase of the rut. And if they are not bred during that period, they'll be in heat again during the second one, starting about the 1st of December. And if they aren't bred then, during that 2-week period, they'll be in estrus again at the end of December and into the first week and a half of January. And hardly a doe will go that long. Only about 5% of does are bred in that the last of those 3 periods of breeding. So 85% in the first one, about 10% in the second one, and 5% in the third one. So, but anyway, because each one is only in heat for a short period of time, and most of them are on different days, hardly ever see 2 in one area in heat at the same time. And you find no evidence of that. It's pretty rare. I've seen it though. I have, actually. My daughter Peggy's big 10-pointer, she got one year. He had a harem of does with him. And there was more than one in heat at one time. And they were off their own ranges with that buck. But anyway, but one chance. And so remember that. Now, if you fail to get them on that first chance, and you know, I would say 80–90% of the time it happens without you even knowing it, that, you know, that buck will find you and conclude that this is not a good place to be, especially during daylight hours. Detour widely around this area, right? All the while these humans are out here in the woods. So, and then from that time on, they're going to remember how you smell, what you look like, the sound you make, the sound of your voice, sound, anything that tells them you're here, like the sound of your vehicle even, the sound of you chopping wood, the sound of you putting a tree stand in a tree. They know what that means, these older bucks nowadays. If they hear that, they might come by there early the first morning you're out there, but chances are if they heard or smelled or saw anything that made them suspicious, they're going to check you from downwind before they get close. And you can't fool their noses, and there's no way you can suppress all the odors a human emits during the hunting season. So you can reduce them, but you can't get rid of them all. So, but if you don't smell badly, really strong, strange odors, you aren't going to alarm them. But they're going to stay home. They're going to stay in that range, but they're just going to start staying 100 yards or more away from where they found you from that point on during the hunting season. And the next hunting season, they're gonna come opening morning. Oh, he's back again, and he's in the same place. Well, this is going to be easy. I don't even have to go any. I don't have to. Now I know he's there. I can go anywhere I want out here and not worry about that hunter in that tree. You see, so easy. Year after year after year, and then die of old age during its 7th winter. So that happens. We waste all those really great bucks on. Only 10% of them get to breed, and the rest of them, they don't even do that. Some of them get really big, become trophy class bucks, despite the fact that they're not dominant breeding bucks. So those are good bucks to hunt, you know. Well, quit wasting those bucks. So learn how to hunt them. But that's what we do nowadays. But these bucks over the years, they taught us, don't waste time. Even if you think you haven't been found there the first day you use a tree stand, the odds are, I'd say more than 90%, 9 out of 10. He found you there, and he's now avoiding you already, right away, at the beginning. No matter how good you think you are, and you aren't. You know, to be really good, you gotta refer to my new hunting book. You know, how to walk in the woods that doesn't, in a way, it doesn't startle or alarm deer while going to and from a stand site. If you don't know anything about that, the worst thing to do is stop often and sneak, move slowly, stop often, sneak, look. That's terrible. That you're making the sounds of a predator, stalking. And you're making sounds of a big predator that's stalking, you know, stepping on big twigs that snap loudly underfoot, that kind of thing. That's a big one, and he's hunting as a human. So, now, we learned quite a bit today about buck hunting, and the most important thing is that when you're hunting big bucks, you're going to get one chance at one sight. And so, when you're scouting, plan ahead. Don't tie yourself to one spot where you're going to just waste your time for the rest of the hunting season. Always hunt close to very fresh tracks and or droppings. Well, there you go, guys. Now you've learned more ways to tip the odds in your favor when hunting older bucks. It doesn't make it easier, but if you truly want to be regularly successful in taking such deer, these are the things, only way I know how to do it, but it works. It really works well. It can really change your luck in taking older bucks by doing the kind of things I've been talking about, little by little. But keep that in mind. You know, they're not stupid animals. They know a lot more about you than you know about them. Believe me, once you've hunted them for a season from then on, it's going to be really tough to outfox them. Hunting using old traditional hunting methods. So you got to change. Okay, now before you go, be sure to poke that subscribe button down below there, that red one. I appreciate you doing that. And also the thumbs up if you like what you learned today. That's important to me too in my future as a speaker on YouTube. Okay? And get your book. You'll be glad you did. Okay, with that, well, see, I'll say goodbye for now, and we'll talk to you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.